Our next guest from the Veterans Administration is Dr. Laurence Kaminsky, who is with the Million Veteran Program. And Dr. Kaminsky with the Veterans Administration is a gene bank expert. Dr. Kaminsky, nice to have you with us.
Nice to be here.
What is a gene bank expert?
Well, before I try and answer that question, let me explain a little bit about what we're trying to do in the context of human disease.
Okay.
So human disease, or most human disease, is really a result of some kind of genetic susceptibility and an environmental trigger. So by that I mean that some defect in an individual's genes could make them susceptible to getting a disease. But until they're exposed to some kind of trigger in the environment, they won't get the disease.
Could you explain what most people know what a gene is, and what genetic susceptibility is?
Okay, so genes, of course, are what make up our DNA. Our DNA, which essentially governs what we are,
right,
and how we behave, is broken up into a series of pieces, each of which are called a gene, and the gene's role is to pattern a protein, and the protein will actually be made in the body based on the pattern from the gene, and then will govern how you behave. So it could be an enzyme which would make you behave in a certain way, or could make you have red hair, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what the genes are. And genes frequently have changes in them that make each individual's gene slightly different from other people's. And sometimes those changes could make you susceptible to a disease. And if you are susceptible and you do get exposed to something in the environment that could cause that disease, then you will probably get the disease. If you didn't have that change to make you susceptible and you were exposed to that environmental factor, you may not get the disease. And environmental factors could be many different things. They could be viruses, bacteria, chemicals, even stress. So all of these things could trigger a disease, and if you're susceptible, you'll get the disease.
One of the things I was not aware of until a few years ago is that Agent Orange, which was used in the Vietnam War, was made in the city of Rensselaer, right across the Hudson River from the city of Albany, and obviously many of our Vietnam veterans were impacted by Agent Orange. Those impacted by Agent Orange, obviously it impacts their genes, and would their offspring be impacted by the Agent Orange as well?
Not necessarily. That Agent Orange, in the case that I'm describing, would be the trigger. And so if you were susceptible to the effects of Agent Orange, then you would have quite severe consequences. But perhaps if you weren't susceptible, then even though you were exposed, you might not have had those health consequences.
One thing, and my wife is not a veteran, but her grandmother was a chimney, smoked all the time, and she lived to her mid-90s, and unfortunately my wife is a chimney as well, and she has had no impact. So to a degree, what you're saying is that Agent Orange or nicotine from tobacco, someone could not be impacted by it at all because of their genetics? Right.
They may not get lung cancer while many others do.
What is the purpose of the Million Veteran Program?
So to be able to determine whether particular changes in one's genes would make you susceptible, you need frequently to have large numbers of people in studies. Getting these large numbers of people sometimes can take years, many years, to generate the population that you want to study. What the VA has decided to do is form a bank which will in effect be the largest gene bank in the world. And once that bank is formed with 1 million samples in it, which is the goal, which should take 5 to 7 years to do, one can approach the VA with a proposal to do a study using that sample, and the sample would be there and waiting, so you wouldn't have to wait years to generate your sample. And why the VA is doing this is because it is particularly well suited to do it. First of all, it has a very large population of patients. It has an electronic medical record system, which is essential for accessing lots of data about each patient. It has a population who, by and large, are willing to participate in a research program, which is not true usually of the general population. So the plan now is to collect samples from 1 million veterans, one blood sample, and we'll extract the DNA from that blood sample and store it. And everything is going to be stored in Boston. This is a massive project. The size of this is greater than any other that's ever been contemplated. Once these samples are all collected, to be able to collect a blood sample from each veteran, we have to consent them. And so the consenting, or in the process, they will agree to provide us with a blood sample. They will allow us to store that blood sample. They will provide us access to the medical record, which is essential for this project. And they will also allow us to approach them if something very interesting ultimately is found in their blood, and we want to ask them further questions. So that's what this Million Veteran program is all about. And it started this year. To be able to gather 1 million samples, just to give you some feel for what that means. There are going to ultimately be 50 different VAs involved in this, and we're one of the first. And Buffalo is also one of the first.
Okay.
So there are 50 sites, 1 million samples. If you divide that in, that's 20,000 samples per site. So we are committed to getting 20,000 samples from our veterans. And the people who can apply have to, of course, be veterans and have to be registered at the home hospital, if it's in Buffalo or here or at the other 50 sites. So this is a major undertaking. We're doing about 20 blood draws a day with 20 new patients a day. For most of our trials, if we get 5 patients a year into it, it's a lot. So this is completely different from any other trial that we've undertaken. And the VA has the infrastructure to do this as well. I don't think anyone else in the country would be able to do this.
So you get about 100 participants a week?
Roughly, that's the goal.
Right.
And they are recruited through Boston, which is the home base for the whole study. They're asked to make an appointment with us. They come in. We explain what the study's about. We consent them. And then we draw 1 sample of blood. There's a little survey they have to do describing their day-to-day behavior as it could affect their health. And that's it for each one of them, unless at some stage we found something and go back to them.
How is this genetic research helpful to our women and male veterans in the United States? And also, is it age sensitive, or is any demographic eligible?
No. The beauty of a gene defect is once you're born with this, then you have it continuing through your lifespan. So it doesn't really matter when you draw the blood. The one problem in this whole big study, which been alluded to earlier this morning, is that the bulk of the veterans are still males. To make this gene bank truly representative of the whole veteran population, we need to recruit as many females as possible into the study. And in fact, we need to emphasize female recruitment more than male, because we'll get lots of males, but we need to really emphasize female recruitment to try and get their numbers up, because the results that we get from the study should be representative of the whole population of veterans.
Now, for women and male veterans watching the show today, Can they volunteer and go to their local VA hospital to participate, or?
Yes, I think this is the main reason I'm sitting here,
Okay.
to appeal to them to please do that. We are very desirous that virtually every veteran in the area participate in this.
So you don't have to wait for Boston to contact you?
No, no, no. If you're coming into the VA for some kind of clinical service and you have a few minutes, we'd love them to come up and see us. We have signs all over, and we'll get them to volunteer and participate.
Does this genetic information that you folks gather, does it remain confidential for our women and male veterans?
Absolutely. The VA is very, very careful with all clinical data, and particularly genetic data of any of the veterans. So we have enormous safeguards put into place to ensure that their privacy, as well as the security of the data that we collect, is secure, and we go to great lengths to ensure that.